This is Bob Oliphant, recording episode 1 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. I'll be reading from the January 4th, 1908 Westford Wardsman. I wanted to mention that the Westford Wardsman, as it appears in Turner's Public Spirit, is typically on the order of 2,000 to 3,000 words, and to publish it in the Westford Eagle Independent, I kind of pare that down to around 800 words. So I'm really only putting in the newspaper about a third to a quarter of what's available. I'll be reading somewhere a little bit more than that, I believe, when I do these podcasts. So the January 4th, 1908 podcast begins with the About Town section. A small sled load of rough boards delivered on the Davis lot last week by William D. Proctor of Dunstable, being interpreted, seems to read that this real estate of green foliage is soon to be changed into personal property by a liberal use of the axe, and these boards are for parlor, sitting room, and kitchen of those who cause a contact between the axe and the tree. This is one of the best lumber lots in the state for its size. It is also closely after that charming, romantic scenery that nature so dearly loves to exhibit, being nearest neighbor and next of kin to Paradise Lost, that's in quotes, a resort so well known and oft quoted by the residents of Great Tadmuck Hill. I should mention that Paradise Lost was the name of a little section of woods that used to appear on the northern edge of Tadmuck Hill, just north of the center of the town, and it was reputed to be quite a beautiful spot. The Davis lot is located on the northerly slope of this hill, that is Tadmuck Hill, where the Westford Center is located, closely nestling by Cold Spring. The soil of this lot is still owned by Albert D. and Samuel A. Taylor. The electrics were delayed at the foot of Cummings Hill Tuesday afternoon by the breaking of two arms. The electrics, of course, are the trolleys. The conductor and motormen set the arms without the aid of any other surgeon. Delays have been caused several times by a maliciously inclined disposition, setting the brakes maliciously tight on the transfer car at Brookside so that it became necessary to disconnect the brake from the car before a start could be effected. The arms he's talking about are not people's arms. They're the arms that connected the trolley car to the overhead wires that provided the power for the trolley car. A force of men are busy exterminating the present generation of brown-tailed moths that infest the shade trees on the public roads. Much as we admire shade trees, the thought cannot be repressed that there is an element of, quote, strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. That's a quote from Matthew 23, verse 24. In raising a ladder 40 feet long plus a cutter 25 feet long to reach some of these nests where the whole township range of forest remains unmolested, the nursery for the pest of the shade trees. These old, tall, hardened elms cannot be seriously injured along the limits of, quote, beautiful for situation, end quote, if left unprotected. Otis Day, the eldest son of Quincy Day, has just entered Amherst Agricultural College, that's now UMass Amherst, where he is to take a course of study in learning how to make the earth yield her increase according to modern methods. As Otis is well equipped by nature, the prospects of future harvests are cheering. The Westford AA, that stands for Athletic Association, are making preparations for the annual dance, which will take place about the middle of January, according as the best orchestra can be arranged for a date. This and the Farmers Institute, which is also a January visitor, will help to perpetuate the youthful spirit of the town. The Athletic Association typically held a dance every January as a fundraiser to support the athletic activities of the various teams in town. At the installation of officers of Littleton Grange last Wednesday evening, W.M. Wright and Mrs. Clara Grieg of Westford Grange were the installing officers. The Grange, if I digress a little bit, the Grange was a very important fraternal and sororal organization in Westford. Granges are primarily focused on the agricultural industry, and Westford was very much an agricultural town 100 years ago, although it was beginning well into its industrial phase also. But the Grange was a very popular and well-attended organization, and Granges throughout the area often visited each other, so this was nothing unusual. I continue. Last Sunday morning, a deer was seen between the Unitarian Church and the library. It appeared to have got onto the scent of an opinion as to whether it was best to remember the Sabbath day by going to the church or going to the library. It finally decided to follow old-time remembrances and galloped off on a browsing expedition over Mr. Seavey's raspberry farm. Mr. Seavey lived in the house that was just to the east of the library. Just previous to Christmas, ice on Burgess Pond measured 6 inches, but the weather since, which has produced dandelions and violets, has forced the ice into liquidation. Next we come to the center section of the Wardsman. The WCTU, that's the Women's Christian Temperance Union, met at the home of Mrs. Nellie Karkin Wednesday and was the usual pleasant and social gathering. The following delegates were appointed to attend the county convention to be held at Winter Hill, Somerville, January 29th. Mrs. C.H. Wright, Mrs. Lambert, Mrs. Blood, Mrs. Karkin, Mrs. Hildreth, and Mrs. Harmon. The members sent a check as a token of appreciation to Mrs. Rolfe for her recent helpful talk before this union. The Society sent at Christmas a well-filled box to headquarters in Boston containing vegetables, fruits, jellies, etc. The Middlesex North Agricultural Society will hold a Farmers' Institute in the Town Hall Wednesday, January 15th. At the morning session, Judge Lyman of Northampton, lecturer on law at the Massachusetts Agricultural College, again, UMass Amherst, will speak on, quote, law for the farm, end quote. In the afternoon, Reverend George T. Kengott will tell about his trip through Palestine on horseback, illustrated with the stereopticon. This program should bring a full attendance. It is seldom so entertaining a program is offered free to all comers. Westford Grange will furnish dinner at the usual price. And I think that the usual price was free, so that's a good deal. Mrs. M.J. Wheeler is sick with grip. Grip was what we would call influenza. L.W. Wheeler has recently had the same affliction, which has somewhat impeded the completion of the shingling of the home roof that he has been engaged with. The Wheelers lived just to the east of what is now Wheeler Lane, kind of across from Rodenbush Community Center. Miss Eva M. Pine has been obliged to spend part of her vacation entertaining the grip. Owing to the prevalence of sickness, the school committee extended the academy vacation 1 week, making the interval from school 2 weeks, the same as the lower grade schools in town. Charles Hildreth, who was acutely sick the first of the week, is much improved. The next section is the Graniteville section of the Westford Wardsman. Several new cases of scarlet fever have been reported here this week, and with the number of children that are ill with chickenpox and grown people that have the grip, there are a great number here sick at the present time. Owing to this fact, the school committees have decided to keep all the schools closed for a week longer than was intended, with the chances of extending the time if the conditions warrant it. Obviously, their schools are just coming off of their Christmas vacation. The Ladies' Aid Society of the Methodist Church met with Mrs. Lucy Blood last Thursday afternoon. Lucy lived on Broadway, right around the corner from the Methodist Church in Graniteville. Following the usual custom, Wednesday, January 1st, being a holy day in the Catholic Church, Mass was celebrated in St. Catherine's Church here at 7:30 a.m. by Reverend E.T. Schofield. All the manufacturing places started up here at the usual hour Monday morning, and the employees feel much refreshed after their brief vacation. The homes of J.H. Pine, C.H. McCullough, and Charles Brooks are now under quarantine on account of scarlet fever. Quarantines were fairly common 100 years ago, kind of a excessive social distancing mechanism, but it seemed to work. We certainly had some fine weather during Christmas week and think that nature must have miscalculated somewhere. For while walking through Westford Center last Sunday, Joe Wall of this village picked several dandelions in full bloom. This is no nature fake, for the writer has received one of the blossoms from the original bunch. The next section is labeled the Forge section. It's the Forge Village section. On Monday, December 30th at 3 o'clock, Miss Alice Weaver was united in marriage to Mr. Tyler of Worcester, Reverend C.P. Marshall of Westford performing the ceremony. There are many sick in the village. Mrs. G.H. Prescott and Mrs. Thompson are still on the list. Also, Mrs. Jackson. Mrs. Ralph Clement came to care for Mrs. Jackson, but was obliged to return to her home in Waverly Saturday, and a niece of Mrs. Jackson is now with her. Mr. Pulsiver has the grip and pleurisy. The entertainment at Abbott Hall every evening this week has been well patronized, and later the results of the contest will be announced. I'm not sure what those contests were. Abbott Hall, there was an Abbott Hall in both Forge Village and Graniteville, built by Abbott Worsted Company and used for meetings and social activities in those two communities. Felix Leclerc and son Joseph went to Stanford PQ Tuesday. PQ is the province of Quebec, where they have relatives and friends. There were a lot of French Canadians working in the Abbott Worsted Mill primarily, and also in the Sargent's Machinery Company. And most of them came from Quebec, and they're mentioned quite frequently in the Westford Wardsman. The mills have started up in full, having given the operatives a vacation of Christmas week. The mother of Miss Pine, teacher in our primary school, is very sick with the grip. John Splain has been sick, but is now able to be out again. Mrs. Carmichael has the grip. Thomas Fisher, teacher of manual training in Lowell High School, his wife and Miss Milner, another Lowell teacher, were calling upon friends here Wednesday. Thomas Fisher was one of the several children of Alvin Fisher and his wife, who lived here in Westford and had quite a large family who all married very well and were very active in activities in Westford and in Lowell also. Another one of the children was Edward Fisher, who was a lawyer and town clerk for a while. An old landmark, a large elm tree, succumbed to the axe yesterday. Mr. Parsons had the tree cut, for it was the abode of the brown-tailed moth, and it seemed the surest way to exterminate them. The brown-tailed moth was an infestation not unlike the gypsy moth that we've had several times in Westford, and required a lot of attention in the trees to prevent the caterpillars for the moth from going up and down the trunk. That's all for this week. Please join me for the next podcast when we'll be reading from the January 11th, 1908 Westford Wardsman. Thank you.